In this lesson, we're taking a look at interval references. This means we're going to highlight the use of each musical interval within a well-known piece of music so you can train your ears to recognise them and better understand the effect that they have on the sound. This is part of my intermediate theory course and a direct follow-on to the previous lesson where we looked at how the interval system works, so do check that out if you're unsure of it. The link to the full course is in the description below. You can also find some extra resources on my Patreon page, including, for the guitar players, some diagrams showing how to find each interval on the fretboard. Now I should point out that we're going to be looking at melodic intervals, meaning one note followed by another, rather than harmonic intervals where you hear both notes at the same time. And another thing I want to make a note of is that the starting note doesn't matter, it's just the distance to the following note. So you'll notice I'm going to be jumping around the fretboard a little bit and probably playing some of the examples in different keys to the original recordings, but it doesn't matter because it's just about the distance between the notes. So don't get too hung up on exactly what key we're in. So with all that said, let's dive in and take a look. So starting with our smallest interval, which is the minor second, and there's a great example for this one which is pretty universally used, and that is the theme tune from Jaws. Now the theme is basically based just off this semitone movement, so if I play this on guitar I'm going to use the open low E, then the first fret which is the F, and that's our semitone movement which basically the entire theme is based on. So a nice obvious example there. Moving on to the major second now, which is the same as a tone movement, and a really good example for this one is Happy Birthday. So that first movement between happy and birthday, that's a tone. Another good example for this one is if you've learned a major scale, the first movement of a major scale. That would be a tone as well, and if you sing the do re mi thing, then the movement between the do and the re, that's your major second. And one final example, we've got a Christmas example, it's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The two syllables in Rudolph are a tone, so there's your major second examples. Moving on to minor thirds now, and we've got three pretty good kind of rocky guitar-y style ones. An absolute classic would be the riff to Smoke on the Water, so that first movement, that would be a minor third. I'm playing it in power chords, but even if I just play the single notes, that's your minor third movement. Another good one is the start of Seven Nation Army, so again, that first movement, that's a minor third. And final guitar one is Iron Man by Black Sabbath, so the riff, again, if I just play single notes, that first movement is a minor third, so some good guitar-centric ones to recognise there. And if you're not as into the rock stuff, a good classical example is Greensleeves, so that first movement is also a minor third. Major thirds now, and I've just got two traditional examples for you, so they might not quite be as cool, but they definitely do work. The first one is When the Saints Go Marching In, and it's the movement between the O and the when. So that's your major third. And the second example is Kumbaya, so we've definitely moved on from Black Sabbath here, but that works as well, so that first movement, there's your major third. So not quite as interesting or heavy as the previous ones, but most people probably will know at least one of those examples. And now it's the perfect fourth, and we have another really good universal example for this one, which is the Wedding March. That initial, that's a really good obvious example of a perfect fourth. But another quite good one is the theme from Harry Potter. Loads of people know Harry Potter, so you could use that as well. Again, that first movement, that's your fourth. Alright, so we've reached the halfway point, which means we're up to the tritone. This is the really dissonant sounding augmented fourth or diminished fifth interval, and a good example for this one is the very start of the Simpsons theme. So not when the main bit of music kicks in, but when the titles are appearing through the clouds. That first interval between the word the and Simpsons is a diminished fifth, so we have, and and then it resolves afterwards, but that first movement, that's your tritone. And for a more rocky example, the start of YYZ by Rush is a really good one. It basically just plays on this tritone theme. Technically it starts with a downwards movement, but because it's splitting the octave in half, you're definitely just hearing that tritone sound. And I've just thought actually the start of Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix, I'm pretty sure does the same thing as well, so those might be some pretty good examples also. Perfect fifth now, and another good universal example for this one, which is the Star Wars theme. Theme tunes are really good for this sort of thing because most people recognise the really popular ones, and this time it is when the main melody kicks in, so it's that. That very first movement, that's your perfect fifth. And other examples would be either Twinkle Twinkle or The Alphabet, which use just the same tune. Again, that first movement is a fifth, and one final one would be the initial vocal melody in Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis. So when he says take my hand, it's the movement between take and my, so. Another good example of a fifth at the start of that one. Moving on to the sixths now, and the example of a minor sixth that I used to always use was actually the Entertainer, which is more of a piano piece, but it did work because it's got that back and forth movement, So that worked for me when I was doing exams on this sort of stuff, but one that I found recently which works really well, especially if you're a guitar player, is the start of Slow Dancing in a Burning Room by John Mayer. So loads of guitar players love this song, and when you hear that initial, that movement there, that's a minor sixth, so then you've got a lot of nice stuff that follows on, but it's got a little slide at the start, but once you're past the slide, you're just hearing a minor sixth there. Next we've got the major sixth, and a really good example for this one is the vocal melody from My Way by Frank Sinatra, because the first few intervals he's just jumping up and down a major sixth, so you get this. And then eventually he moves off. But those initial movements, all a major sixth. And just to give you another example, we've got another Christmas one, which is Dashing Through the Snow. The two syllables in dashing are a major sixth. That initial, those are your sixths, so a couple of examples there for you. Moving up to the sevenths now, and a good example of the minor seventh is The Winner Takes It All by ABBA. So it's actually the two syllables in the word winner, so we've got, and then it resolves afterwards. That initial movement, that's a minor seventh. And also another good one for guitar players is the riff to Can't Stop by Red Hot Chili Peppers, and this time it's when the riff actually kicks in, so we get that. If I just play the notes, that's your minor seventh. So a couple of examples there. Now we've got the major seventh, which is the biggest interval you can take before reaching the octave. And I've just got the one example for this one, but it's quite a good one. It's the start of the chorus to Take On Me. So you'll notice there's a really big jump in pitch between the word take and the word on. That's your major seventh, so. And then he just resolves it to the octave afterwards, but that first jump, that's a major seventh. And finally, we've got the octave. I think it's pretty handy to be able to recognize an octave movement as well. A really good example is the vocal melody from Somewhere Over the Rainbow between some and where. And then it's, but that first movement is an octave. And just to give you some guitar-y examples, we all know the main riff to Sweet Child of Mine. That first movement is an octave, and finally, great one to finish on is My Sharona, because it's just playing about jumping up and down an octave, so yeah, some really good examples there. So there you have at least one reference for each interval within an octave. Now definitely add more of your own examples to this list because it's all about creating references that work for you personally. And there's tons of websites and apps that you can use to test yourself on this and improve your recognition. But I think even if you just have a basic understanding of what each interval sounds like, that's great for training your ears to recognize more subtle differences in pitch, and therefore makes it more likely that you're going to find the correct notes when working out songs. So now you know how intervals work and what they sound like. In the next lesson, we're going to start putting them together to see how chords are formed, which is really useful. Remember, you can download extra resources on my Patreon page, including the guitar diagrams for all the intervals on the fretboard. You'll find the link to that in the description, alongside the link to this full intermediate theory course. Be sure to subscribe for more content, and I'd really appreciate you giving this video a like if you found it helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.